Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. My name is Joe. That is Jamie Jackson, sports writer for The Guardian, and this is a one-on-one interview. We are here at UC San Diego in California, following Manchester United's pre-season tour, as you can see. And I'm going to be asking you, Jamie, a lot of questions about transfers. We're talking Kane, Hojlund, Amrabat, potentially an update on the ownership situation as well. First of all, though, how are you getting on?
Never been better, thank you. San Diego is my kind of town, west coast of America. Nice sweeping boulevards, very sort of quiet, laid back, beach, harbour, staying in a nice motel. Can't argue. How about you?
I'm fantastic, absolutely brilliant, thank you. Let's get into this Kane stuff then, because you were one of the people that sort of broke this story, and it was that essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, that Tottenham have said, or the owners of Tottenham have told Daniel Levy that if Harry Kane isn't going to sign a new deal this summer, you have to sell him. We're not letting him go for free. Is that the case, and what is the sort of the latest on that situation?
Yeah, I mean, that is the case, and it's a very interesting development. So it's basically Joe Lewis, who is the majority owner of Tottenham, has told Daniel Levy, who actually does have a stake in Tottenham, but nowhere near the size of Joe Lewis. He's basically said to him, you know, if you cannot get him to sign a new contract, because his current one expires next summer, then it has to be sold. Now that's interesting for two reasons. The main one's obviously Harry Kane. Everyone kind of wants him, he's so good, but also it sort of shines a light a little bit on Daniel Levy, who is probably quite rightly, but I always think a little bit exaggerated, quite rightly portrayed as a arch negotiator, you know, very good at business. But you know, you're sort of seeing here, the sort of the reality of business and actually who is the boss at that club. I mean, Joe Lewis is a billionaire a few times over. He's a very smart man in that regard to do with money. And you'd have to think, if you actually think about it, okay, you're a billionaire, but do you really want a potential £100 million walking out the door for free, if you can put it that way, next summer? So that's the conversation. So where are we at now? We're at sort of the back end of July. Yeah. I think that the window closes. I think it's actually on the evening of the 1st of September. So I don't know, what's that? 6 weeks. Yeah. United certainly entered this summer. Erik ten Hag, as a manager, he was his number one target. Harry Kane, he really, really, really admires him. Thinks that, you know, this player would transform Manchester United. I don't think anyone would disagree. I mean, he scored 30 goals in a struggling Spurs side last season. So that's where we're at with it. Now, if you ask me a slightly different question, does this open the door for United?
Well, that was going to be my next question. So how does that fit with United?
It's an interesting question. What people like me are being told from those who should know at the club is no, it does not. Right. Now, I you know, to myself, I pose the question, interesting, because why would Manchester United not want, or certainly want to consider, a player that is an Erik ten Hag favourite in a position that he needs to fill if there is a slight possibility? So let's wait and see. But currently the information is no, this does not. Now, some of that might be to do with his wage demand, which we're sort of reliably told is best part, well, £30 million a year, which if you do the maths, depends how you want to slice it, but I think it's over 600 a week. I know.
Isn't that like triple what he's on now? Yeah,
I think apparently he has being offered, and United may well would be prepared to match this, the best part of 400, right? Okay. But yes, I don't know if it's triple, but it's getting on towards triple. He's a very good player. Now, as we all know, football continues to sort of be crazy in terms of inflated transfer fees, and wages, etc., etc. But that's kind of where we're at with it at the moment.
Do you think that, obviously you said that the people who ought to know are saying that United currently aren't going back in for him or aren't going in for him, but do you think there's a situation here where we look back 12 months at the Frenkie de Jong saga, as it turned out? It was so clear from everyone that United wanted him. You know, they almost weren't making... Ten Hag wasn't saying it publicly, but it was very clear that United wanted Frenkie de Jong. And we were made to be embarrassed by him teasing us along, or perhaps, who knows how exactly it unfolded. Do you think there's a situation where if we publicly go for Kane and lose him to Bayern, or he stays at Spurs, we have egg on our face once again?
I don't know for sure, but that is definitely a scenario why this might be the information. I mean, why I feel it's really interesting that Daniel Levy's basically been ordered to get him to sign again, or you've got to sell him, is because the reason why they pulled out of it initially this summer was because they did not want to be led down the garden path, wild goose chase with Daniel Levy, characterised to me. So why would we want to get involved in that again? With regard to sort of a long chase. Well, this now kind of clears that up a little bit, because, but there's obviously moving parts in this. Daniel Levy he may have to sell him, but to another Premier League club, especially to Manchester United, I don't know how that would go down with himself. He's obviously a Spurs supporter, and also the Spurs fans, and also Bayern Munich. Kind of interested, but what does Kane want to do? That's the other thing about this as well.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions, because we've seen a lot of different transfers unfold different ways. Sometimes you see the agent forcing it, sometimes you see the player. This one seems to be a mixture of club now saying you need to go if you're not going to sign, and player. But his agent is his brother, or it's a family member, isn't it? We don't have this sort of super agent throwing him around Europe. What is the understanding of what he wants? Because Bayern Munich obviously makes sense for trophies, but surely this sort of Premier League record is somewhere in his mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. Correct me if I'm wrong, but did he not go to training last summer? Was it 2 years ago when City were interested? I think
it was 2 years ago.
Was it like?
I think,
so that, there is a massive sign that he wanted to leave them. We're now 2 years on. He's going to be 30 this week, I think it is. I think it's on Friday. So he's not getting any younger. But the type of player he is, I would suggest you could get 4, if not 5 top. Yeah. Like as he's playing now.
Benzema, Lewandowski style. Yeah.
Exactly. I think he wants to leave. And this is, otherwise why would Joe Lewis give his chairman the ultimatum that you've got to make him sign or sell him, because that doesn't say to me he's about to sign a new contract anyway. So he doesn't need to be sort of pressured, Daniel Levy. I think it's very difficult in transfers. I always say that the one way of sort of describing them, in my experience of reporting on them for over 2 decades, is something that could be true one day, right? Genuinely could have changed the next day, and no one's lied. It's just genuinely changed. So, I would like to think, Ten Hag's obviously got other targets now. He's looking at Hojlund and Kouani, the Ajax, the Eintracht Frankfurt centre forward, but they weren't his first choice. You know what I mean?
And they're just not of the same magnitude as Kane.
Exactly. They're both unproven in our league for a start.
Yeah, exactly. And with Kane, another point. There's been this whole sort of parallel conversation all summer about FFP with United, and it seems to have sort of caught up with us a little bit. And regardless of who the owner is, because of what we've made and spent over the last few years, there is this kind of £115 million limit before sales.
Yes.
There was also a point, though, I think it was in the last press conference, where Erik ten Hag mentioned about if a target comes up, or if we'll see what we can do, or this suggestion that there is a bit of wiggle room there somehow if a player like Kane comes along. Is that the case?
It's interesting because you'd like to think yes, but you're right. I've not been told this exactly, but I think ballpark figure 120 million. Yeah, basically what you said, 115. Yeah. Well, they spent. I don't know, sort of most of it, haven't they already? On Mount
around 110
and on Arna, and so the information was, and I don't think it's changed in terms of sort of where the money is they'll have to sell, and maybe that's kind of what he meant by, if a player comes up. I mean, the usual candidates, if they can get 40 for Maguire, right, and then you've got like Ilanga's going to go, I think
there was pictures floating of him in a Forest shirt.
Right, well, there you go. So I mean, you tell me what the fee will be. It won't be loads, but
no,
so you
15 million I think was suggested.
Right. So you can sort of get up to, you can sort of see a scenario where they've got the 100 million if it is that for Kane or AN over. But I don't think they, unless it is Kane, I don't think they're going to, want to, because if you then factor in the wages that I mentioned. My maths isn't great, but I would make it, if it was 100 million fee and 30 million a year, let's say he signs 4 years, Kane, it's like 230 million for a player. But as I've said this a few times, on your channel, I'm not a United fan, but I do get frustrated a little bit with the club because, and it's obviously we all know why, because the Glazers' ambition is top 4, really. But just break the bank one summer and just go for it properly. Yeah. And they would argue, well, we've got Pogba 1 year, 89. I get all that, but you're in a situation now with Ten Hag where he's won the Carabao Cup, lost the FA Cup final, and got third. Now is the time. He's building something. He obviously is. He's a great. You've probably done the hardest thing in a way. Got a really good manager to your place, but he needs. He needs the next sort of proper, ambitious step. So, I don't know.
And just on Kane as well. The Bayern Munich situation, we were chatting about this on the channel the other day, but you don't usually see Bayern in long, drawn-out transfers and then not get someone. They're usually quite swift, they're quite targeted, they do well to keep their business private. The fact that we've seen this public chase for Kane over the last, coming up to a month now, does that indicate to you that they're trying to put pressure on Tottenham, or that there's some sort of stumbling block going on here?
I think you're right. I think both. The fact that Uli Hoeneß, who I think is the honorary president now, came out and said, as long as Kane sort of continues to show the indication that he wants to sign for us, then I think it'll happen. Remember he said something like that? I've said it clumsily, but basically, why is he? When I heard that, I was in the car somewhere. When I heard that, I was like, why have you said that? Because it doesn't seem particularly shrewd, clever. Again, I don't want to over-exaggerate Daniel Levy's sort of prowess, because I think it is done over the top a little bit. But that's not really. Is that really going to sort of help? But maybe there is something, maybe it's either because they're desperate, because maybe it is slipping away, as you say, it's been a bit long drawn out, or because, I don't know, you'd like to think it was strategic from Bayern, because otherwise, why has he said it?
Yeah, interesting. I want to talk about Hojlund and other transfers in just a second, but before that, let's get to the sponsor for today's show, and that is Manscaped. Obviously, we know that Manscaped have been sponsoring our tour out here in America, so if you use the code Paddock Tour, you can join over 8 million men who are basically using, let's be honest, the best male grooming products in the world. Yeah, I use them. I can't speak for Jamie, but I can speak for myself. I use Manscaped. They are fantastic. And using the code Paddock Tour, you can get 20% off and free shipping. And the great thing about Manscaped, they've got you covered everywhere. So they've got the Lawnmower 4.0, which is, of course, that's your trimmer. That's the one that's the nuts and bolts. You know what I mean? That's the one that you're going to be using day to day. But then you've got your toners, you've got the boxer briefs, you've got the bag, you've got the ear and nose hair trimmer as well. It's everything. If you think, that could do with being sorted, they've got a job for it. And it's all in the Performance Package 4.0. So make sure you check that out. It's just the one-stop shop for male grooming, and 8 million men trust them.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Impressive.
8 million people don't do anything they don't want to. It's that simple. So make sure you use the code Paddock Tour to get 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. The link is in the description, so just go in there, click on it, and that'll take you to everything you could possibly need. Right, enough of that. Let's talk about Rasmus Hojlund, because United need a striker again. Ten Hag said it. He doesn't like talking about specific players, but he's happy to talk about ideas and positions. Yes. We know we need a striker, maybe two. First of all, the Hojlund interest is real, isn't it? Of course.
100%, yeah.
There was talk at the start of the window of a sort of younger player and an older player. Kane and a Hojlund was the names mentioned. Do you think that's still the case, or is it now a Hojlund or Kane, or
Listen, he would love them both.
Yeah.
That would be a dream scenario, but I just don't think, because of the money thing that we discussed, that's viable. But he definitely wants him. I think he's the favourite at the moment in this sort of wacky world of transfers that we're talking about, and we're sort of existing. To be the striker that Ten Hag signs. But a couple of things here. So United won't pay more than 60 million.
Yeah.
Now,
pounds is that?
Yeah, pounds. Yeah. Okay. Which is about 70 million euros.
Yeah.
I think, as we all know, I think he's 20 years old. I think he scored 9 times in Serie A last season, which was his first season in Serie A.
The numbers are just insane.
So exactly. So I would suggest 60 million is kind of insane, but okay, they will go to that. But I'm not too sure that they're going to go to that. Going to have that. Now, last summer, Anthony, put it this way, they ended up. This is United, obviously, but ended up paying. I don't know. I think it was at least 20 million euros more than they had priced him at. I might even, what they. In the reason why I'm using this is it's a similar scenario, right? It was about this kind of time in the in the summer. Now that's our valuation, and they ended up, obviously going beyond that. But they're going to have to get someone in. I mean, it's. I'm not sort of being. How can I say this? I'm not sort of being cruel by saying this, but Manchester United, how can they not have? I know. A proper centre forward. How can it be almost not desperate, but sort of like we're talking about it? You've got sort of 3 weeks before the season starts, and they haven't got this player in it. And actually, last summer I know he had Ronaldo, but he never fancied Ronaldo. Martial, everyone knows he's injury prone. That's not his fault, but he is. It's just a ridiculous situation. So this is why you'd like to think if or when, because they'll have to get someone. Yeah. Maybe this will sort of not complete the squad, because I think you sort of still could do with 2 more players, let's say. But you'd actually start to think he's had 2 summers, Ten Hag, and he's basically done really well. In terms of who he's bought. Obviously, Hojlund, if it was him, he'd have to prove himself. But you'd like to think maybe actually after 10 years since Ferguson left and sort of all the sort of false dawns, if I can put it that way, maybe actually now it's going to happen for United to actually challenge. But yeah, so at the moment it's him and Kouani. He rates them both the same, but I think Hojlund is the it's a favourite.
So on those strikers, then obviously you said Hojlund is the favourite over Kolo Muani and himself. Where do we see this being? Because again, it's like United do this weird thing where we've released our maximum bid, 60 million. So now then, surely Atalanta are going to go, all right, well, 60 then. Or they're going to say, no, we're not doing it. There's no way United can now get a good deal like this. Or is that, do you know what I mean? Like, what is that for a tactic?
Well, so I've given Anthony as a sort of an example of what's backing up what you're saying. But I suppose Mason Mount, they would argue they got the price that they told, Chelsea that they wouldn't, that they were going to pay, they wouldn't go over. So it's an interesting tactic. Because say it's 60 million. Excuse me. That put it another way around. Say Atalanta say, okay, you're saying 60 million, but give us another 5 million. Are they really going to walk away for that? I mean, I know it's a lot of money to all of us. Yeah. But in terms of what we're talking about here, what the reward could be, it just seems, it is very. It's very difficult for Ten Hag because I think he kind of overachieved last season, right? And he has to basically kind of match that, if not do better. I mean, how do you do? Which I suppose is compete seriously. I think if you say you finish third again, but it's actually really, really, really a tight race. I mean, you're the fans. I'm not. But I would suggest that's an improvement, because you never. I mean, you did get close in January, but again, your squad wasn't. It wasn't sort of robust enough, and Eriksen went down, and Casemiro got sent off or whatever. He got suspended. Blah blah blah. So I think if it comes to like pays an extra 5 or 10, they might get around it by add-ons. What I mean, right? Okay, it's 60 million base, but because the Onana deal, as I think we all know, is sort of like got 5 million of add-ons, which again is described as, if those will happen, the club would be delighted. I don't know this for sure, but because it might mean a title win or something like that, with him in the side. So that's maybe how they would build in the rest of it. Yeah, we've seen things like Ballon d'Or clauses in add-ons and stuff in the past, haven't we? Just you mentioned there about United almost having to sort of improve, and Jay made this point. It was at the start of the season, so it was before Ten Hag had this good season. But there was a situation where United could be a much better team than they were the year before under Ole and then under Rangnick, and still finish 6th. Because if Chelsea, City, Liverpool, Arsenal, and Tottenham all have a good year, you could get 70 points and finish 6th. So it's going to be an interesting sort of evolution of the team to see. We could be as good as we were last season or better and still only get 3rd or 4th. So it's a very strange season that's coming up. Definitely. Isn't it? For the Guardian, I have to do, as we all do, all the football reporters, the prediction of the finished table for the upcoming season. I put United, I actually can't remember, but it was certainly no lower than 3rd. It might even have been, I think it was 3rd again. I think it went City, Arsenal, United. And I thought, but I could... When I was thinking about it, I was thinking I can make a case here. They could be 5th or 6th, because of what you just said. I mean, it is very... Each season, when you go into each season, there's always like some sort of really interesting element about it. And it is actually, as we're talking about, I'm thinking, how will the fans take say 3rd place again and no trophy, for example? And when I say fans, I mean like the intelligent ones, not the ones who are sort of like... maybe
all of our fans are incredibly intelligent, so you're talking to the right people there.
I am, so, would 3rd, that's kind of why I said if it was 3rd but you're in a proper title race until whenever April or May, that would probably be good enough in my book. But I don't know, you don't know about football. You're almost going to sound really stupid sort of saying this sort of thing about Manchester City, but Gundogan has left. But Silva might follow. De Bruyne obviously came off in the Champions League final because he's a bit more fragile.
Kyle Walker, another one. Looks like he might well leave.
So I'm making a case here for them sort of being...
No, I like it. This is exactly what we want to see on the chart. Tell me why City might not do very well next year.
But you just don't know. No. I mean, it's cyclical.
And teams, Fergie had missteps, and occasionally you think, no, he has a good... But then you'll let a Jaap Stam go or someone go, and it doesn't always work out for a couple of years. So I suppose it is possible.
Exactly, and this is what, going back to the Kane Hojlund discussion, why it's so important that he has to get in. But Hojlund again is interesting because let's say you get him, as we're just talking, he's unproven. I don't know.
He could feasibly again come in and have a relatively decent season and get 11 goals for United, which probably wouldn't win us any big trophies.
And you reminded me before when you said, because that is, I think that's correct, that at the start of the window it was kind of get him in as a sort of not as a first choice because of what we're saying. So I don't know.
One thing as well that obviously needs addressing, and it's almost we cover United every day, and whatever the biggest news is, whatever's coming out, we'll talk about it and we'll cover it. There hasn't been a big update, any sort of update on the ownership status. You're looking at 6 weeks now.
Yeah,
there was that whole thing of, Qatar have put in their 5th or 6th and final bid.
Yeah.
There won't be anything on that. And since then, there has been no concrete news, almost seemingly whatsoever. What is your understanding of the latest with the takeover?
Yeah, so basically, as you'd expect, I have sort of contacts in both camps, so I sort of like hear from both camps. And the last story I did on it was, I think it was the first day I was out here, was Monday, but it wasn't really anything of great issue. It was just that there was no time frame for Sir Jim Ratcliffe in terms of the Premier League prepared. And the reason why we found that half interesting at the Guardian is because it's just encroaching. It's around the corner of the Premier League, and you suddenly think, wait a minute, it was put up for sale in November, and here we are potentially going into the next season, the new season, and it still hasn't been resolved. But yeah, so with regard to the Sheikh side, I think I've not been told this, but I don't think they've got a time frame on it.
Right.
But I think. And listen, as we're speaking, it could all be sort of being signed and being done. But I think both sides genuinely do not know actually if the Glazers want to sell. Yeah, and I know that is, and I understand it. My son is, but my son is a United fan, and he's not particularly happy with the whole situation.
It's just insane, isn't it? And we've seen the protests consistently for nearly 20 years now, and they've never sort of dragged us along like this in terms of. They're still doing all the things that United fans have disliked them for like I said, nearly 18 years. But to tease and to pretend that you're going to sell and then not,
yeah, I think some of them do.
Yeah,
and want to sell because obviously there's 6 siblings. And I think maybe it's Joel and Avram who are like more.
Yeah,
they can sort of see a scenario where they can make even more money out of your club. We've said this before; it's nothing new. But how it was ever legal. The way it was bought is an absolute.
And then now it's not legal.
Yeah, I know.
But obviously, tough luck, Man United.
I mean, I think it is. This is not based on any fact, just a gut feel. I think it really is sort of maybe 60-40 in favour of them selling, and that's just my feeling about it. I don't. I get the idea because this is what you're told. I get the logic or the sort of common sense from the Sheikh side that he doesn't want to have himself sort of ripped off, right? Yeah. But at the same time, because obviously I don't know the intricate details of the finances, but again, a little bit like the Hojlund thing, what concerns me a little bit is why he hasn't sort of like just gone, right, all right, I'm going to get a little bit.
Yeah.
But maybe he already feels that what he's offered, which I think is no more than 6, is already a bit over the odds. Yeah. He's already sort of gone to where he thinks is the nth sort of degree on it.
And I suppose there's always that element of, all the word is that some of the Glazer siblings think that in 10 years' time, United might be worth 20 billion.
Yeah,
and then they want to keep a share. But who knows, the political landscape of football at the moment, or the financial landscape of football, is changing massively, and it's not the Premier League leading it. For the first time since maybe sort of the Italian league in the 90s.
Yes. You mean the Saudi?
The Saudi league is not just competing with, but blowing the Premier League out of the water. So how will that? It's bizarre.
I don't know about you and sort of the viewers, but the very fact that Mbappe being the subject of a £300 million bid or euro bid from a Saudi team, and the idea that obviously it's a laughable sum, but but no one's laughing at the fact that it's a Saudi team because now we've become used to them actually, going for sort of trophy players, if you like.
And also the way that we're seeing this thing where. There's rumours that within that bid is a built-in thing of, we'll let you go to Real Madrid in 12 months or 2 years.
Right? I didn't realise that. Right.
So that was part of the rumour. We'll give you 700 million or 700 million euros a year, and we'll let you go to Madrid as well. Like, football is having this very strange kind of revolution that's happening at the minute. So who knows how that'll affect the value and the potential sellability of Man United. But I want to thank you for coming on.
I think it's been brilliant.
I've absolutely
thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's going to be all from us. That is me, and that is Jamie Jackson, sports writer for The Guardian. Again, thank you to Manscaped for sponsoring this interview. Make sure you check out the link in the description and use the code Paddock Tour for 20% off and free shipping. Think, what's the code? Well, Paddock are on tour, Man United are on tour. So it's the code Paddock Tour. It's simple. Check them out. Link in the description. Thank you again, Jamie, for coming on.
Thank you.
Always welcome on the channel, and we'll see you in a bit.